Today we'll be looking at this week's auctions, ending anywhere between today, Friday the 9th, and Sunday, May the 11th. Not wasting any time and starting off with something that's an enormous opportunity would be this Enchi Sunset female. It's got less than a day left, it's got a lot of interest, but the bid right now is pretty low. It will go higher, but it's tough to say. Sometimes these things go for crazy amounts. From Captive Bred Specialties, they are very well known for their work in the Sunset project. If you're looking to get into Sunset, this would be a really nice one to keep an eye on. It's got some really nice color, especially sometimes you see the Enchi Sunsets be a little bit more brown. That is not what's happening here. It's very, very nice. Being a female, that's an extra boost, and there's a whole heck of a lot you can work into it. Sticking with Sunset, this one from Chimera would be this Enchi 100% Het Sunset. This is a really nice one as well. So if you don't win the other, this might be a nice second prize because it's already got the building blocks to make an Enchi Clown, which is even more crazy than what we just showed you. Just not every day that you see a visual Sunset on Morphmarket Auctions. But this one is pretty well started at 360 grams. You could get a male Sunset Het Clown for a little bit cheaper than you would a female, that's for sure. Again, you could go a little bit of the cheaper route and get yourself another visual clown Het Sunset for the male, and you'd be guaranteeing everything would be clown in a pairing of that sort. And then you'd have a 1 in 4 chance of getting the visual Sunset, of course, which is good odds to get one, especially when you consider the fact that every single one of the visual Sunsets would be then a Sunset Clown. You can test for Sunset as well. Every single one of the babies, if not visual, would end up being a 66% Het. So you can send those into RGI and have those tested to determine what else you might want to keep, or at the very least, I mean, they would easily sell for more being Het Sunset than the cost of the test. And if you wanted to know what a Sunset Clown looks like, we got a couple here that can show you. There's just your standard Sunset Clown, very, very nice animal. I think that they age very well as well. You can see what something just adding Spot Nose does to it. Kind of lightens it up. Spot Nose lightens things up, adds a nice little pattern, of course, other than what it does to the head. People always think that maybe it just does some stuff to the pattern and to the head, of course, but that is not the case. They do definitely lighten up the animal, and you can definitely see that here when you look side by side the differences, and that's a very nice animal. There's no doubt about that. Again, all you'd really need to do is get a male, like a Spot Nose Clown Het Sunset, if you wanted to work that into there. And that I don't think would be an incredibly hard cost for you to absorb, especially if you're already getting something like this. And considering the potential return on investment, it would be very, very nice. Moving along, but sticking with clown, would be this Pastel Redstripe Wookie Yellowbelly Clown Het DG. So another one with some great upside here, having that Het Desert Ghost. A nice little male here that could easily slot into some of your double recessive projects. As I say often, working the hets against each other is a really nice option. Getting yourself a DG, a Het Clown female, would be a really wise decision. Again, there's so much you could put into here. You already have such power with Redstripe Wookie and Yellowbelly. Pastel might seem like it's unwanted in clown, but when you have Desert Ghost floating around there, that is completely flipped on its head. DG and Pastel age very well and go together really well, like fine wine. So I do not think that that is something I would worry about at all, other than the fact that obviously I would prefer that to be in the female, the Pastel that is, rather than the male. But we're just splitting hairs at that point. This is one I'd actually love to see with Spot Nose. I'd be interested to see it with something like Blackhead as well, but then again, I say everything with Blackhead. So your male can have some of that going on, quite frankly. It would be very nice, be a very great addition to creating the double recessive and maybe adding even more craziness on top of it. It'd be very, very beautiful. DG clowns are very nice, and they're even much nicer when you're adding a lot of extra genetics to the pool. Moving on to an interesting one that you really only see out of Canada, and it's very appropriately named for that. We are looking at this Super Chocolate Possible Het Maple boy here. This one has an okay amount of size to it, and it should be ready to breed for your upcoming season. This seller is out of Canada. They do ship to the US though, so if you are into that, maple is a very unique gene, especially since this one is super chocolate. That is a very enticing thing. Of course, it is only possible Het, and I don't believe anybody at all does a test for maple, but maple is an interesting gene. Before I show that though, let's look at one more here, also from Corey Woods Reptiles, would be this double Het Maple Sunset male, and I think that this one could be even more enticing if you got that double recessive, if you were able to hit it limited at the very least, even though I do very much like the idea of the super chocolate, because you're always getting one copy of chocolate. And of course, don't take my word for it. Obviously, looking at a snake like this, which looks pretty much exactly like a normal, because that's exactly all you're seeing. But a maple itself, if you don't know what that is, it's very, very similar to the Ultramel and the Monarch in many ways. And I believe it has been proven that they are not the same. From what I have seen, they're very much lighter than a Monarch. It's a very, very interesting animal, and they have been proven as a trait that it can be reproduced. They have been making them for quite some time now and proven that genetic out. I don't know very many people who are working this specific line in the US itself, so that could be interesting. And the reason I think that's super interesting that it's combined with Sunset is they're kind of thinking along the same lines that I'm thinking with Monarch, because I saw what the Ultramel sunsets look like, and they are absolutely insane. It is super vibrant, it is super bright, it is super orange, and on top of that it has red eyes. Absolutely incredible animal. I think maybe it's just because the animal's contrasted so well and so nice and bright, so much beauty to it, and I can't wait to see what else you can do with something like this. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like I said, it's darker than an Ultramel and lighter than a Monarch, so it's going to be a little bit darker than this, or more bold, I should say, because those are already very, very nice, bold, beautiful animals. Moving right along to this butter Jaguar Clown. You don't see the Jaguar Clowns very much up here at all. Another one we saw at Tinley Park. I think that the Jaguar Clowns are just absolutely incredible. There's a fire Redstripe Jaguar Clown right there next to a Redstripe Yellowbelly Jaguar Clown, which I think is the one we like the most. It is insane, the amount of granulation in there and the contrast there between the clean pattern. In fact, it's hard to differentiate what's pattern and what's not anymore. It's that wild. You have clean pattern and you have granulated pattern. I guess it is definitely the granulation that is the pattern, but if you look at it, it almost tricks you into thinking that the other way could be very true as well. And that's kind of shows you the power of this cool, insane genetic. I very much would love to see this in, well, what we just saw. Get the Yellowbelly into this instantaneously. Redstripe works very well because anytime you have granulation and red stripes, they seem to go together incredibly well as well. Being in a female, it's got a good amount of interest and some time left, so it's clearly not being overlooked, but I think it's worth keeping an eye on, especially if you're very interested in that gene. Look at the eye stripes too. I don't know why that's so interesting to me. It's just everything's faded and whatnot, but then you have these bold eye stripes coming out of this. It's just so symmetrical with this triangle-like shape up here, almost like a gas mask or something coming out down here, and then two perfect bold lines just perfectly coming out and topping off the eyes, almost like the eye slits are being continued up top or something. They almost look like closed eyes or something. It's very cool. Next up, moving into the Hognoses, a little bit more this week than we typically see, and we actually have a few of them here that we want to talk about today, starting off with this Conda Arctic Albino Sable, which is nicknamed Red Rocket. Ignoring the potential funniness of the name, this is obviously a very beautiful animal, and that's because it is a sunburst, which kind of makes the pattern more of these little spots and whatnot, which the normal ones kind of makes it look like an anaconda, of course, and the Arctic, which gives it a little bit more of a light type look. It's very beautiful. There's no reserve on this, and it's a sunburst with even more going on for it. I think this is a huge pickup. If it keeps the interest low, that is going to be an absolute fleecing. Another nice one here from Frame Shift Reptiles would be this albino het coral, which is also a purple line and a very, very good one. A coral, by the way, when it says het coral, it's het for lavender, which is its own recessive gene. Coral is the nickname of the two put together. The color on this is outstanding. It is absolutely gorgeous. I think that if you work Hognoses, you'd be a fool to ignore the polygenic lines, which is something that passes on all the time to some extent, and that would be purple line. Things like Extreme Red. There's a whole bunch, and Hognoses do them incredibly well, so definitely keep an eye on this one. It is a beautiful boy. And finally, closing out the Hognoses with this Arctic Het Swiss Chocolate. If you're wondering about the Swiss chocolate, well, look no further. There's a whole bunch about it. Some people say it's just another line of the Sable. I disagree. I think that it is extreme and far more intense than Sable, although, yes, I get the similarities. Take a look at like something like this. They are intense. You can get them them very, very dark. You can keep them in this gravelly type look as well. I think this is one of the next big things. There's no doubt about that. Another one that I think has more interest, and it would be a absolute boon to pick up, especially being a female. You can grow this one out while you source a male to start making this amazingness. Arctic with it goes very, very well, by the way. Moving on with this breeder, Black Pastel Pied. Black Pastel Pieds typically have very low pattern, so I'm surprised to see one here with so much pattern. It's very nice, in fact. Of course, everyone knows the famous combination would be the Super Black Pastel Pied, which is otherwise known as the Panda Pied, which is a basically black and white snake for the most part. However, when you do get the Super Black Pastel, there's a few things. Unfortunately, the pattern seems to really dissipate in this case, and in some cases there have been Panda Pieds which have been all white, and that's a darn crying shame, especially since when they do show the pattern, it is very black, pitch black, so your contrast level is pretty much 100% because you have black on white every single time. Like I said though, the amount of pattern is usually fairly low in those super combos, and heck, like I said, even in this one, usually even in the single copy they can be a little bit lower. They say that there's a line that they have that produces higher pattern, which I mean, I can't speak to that, but I mean, here it is. It's insane, and it clearly is a Black Pastel Pied. You could work that line, but there is one other thing other than the patterns that you might take pause to at least consider, is that the Super Black Pastels do have a higher chance of kinking than any other normal snake would. Anytime you breed a ball python though, you have a chance of it being kinked. It's just a fact, but just something to consider if you did want to work the Panda Pieds though. This is one to jump straight into it, or you could work something different, because Black Pastel is very, very nice. It's beautiful, and as long as it's not paired with itself as in the super form or with a copy of Cinnamon, you really don't have anything to worry about with that. They're beautiful morph, and they don't cause any issues when just by themselves at all, or with any other genes than what the ones I just priorly mentioned, I believe. A nice breeder here, whether you're into some heavier combos like those Panda Pieds, or if you just want to go for something else. I think this would be good for beginner, or honestly for some people who are a little bit more veteran. Moving on to a really nice one here. A great opportunity, again from Chimera, would be this Mandarin Clown. This one I think might have the potential to go for a little cheaper. It's nice that it's in the male too. Mandarin is by itself, it's a little more subtle, but it does add a little bit of oranginess to it, to the animal. Similar in a way to how Orange Dream might and stuff like that, but it is a little bit more subtle, except for when you get into certain combos. The most famous one being, of course, the Hypo. The Mandarins, the Super Mandarins especially. The Super Mandarin Hypo, in fact, was one of the most intensely beautiful snakes for such a crazy long time. Some people even thought that it was just the Super Mandarin, but I believe someone has made a combo of the Mandarin Clown Hypo. If that is something you wanted to see, well, look no further. This is the Mandarin Leopard Pastel Hypo Clown. Now imagine this, if you had the super form, it would look like an actual orange, I believe. This one's already gorgeous and beautiful, but that's somewhat of the potential you're messing around with. I would immediately go buy myself a Hypo Clown female, a visual one, quite frankly, and get some other stuff in there. I would immediately start trying to make that sort of combo we just saw there, and maybe strike out on your own, get some other things in there. Definitely would love to see that with Yellowbelly on top of all that, and then you keep that. You could make something like this eventually. Obviously you'd be making your hets right away, but think about this: if you keep your hets, you'd be getting clowns, automatically going clown to clown, and everything else would be guaranteed to be het if you theoretically took my advice and got a visual. So you could keep your snakes, and you would try to identify one male and one female that both have Mandarin in them, maybe a couple females in fact, and therefore you could be breeding this into a program where you could potentially get the Super Mandarin Hypo Clowns. And holy cow, if that wouldn't be amazing. The only thing you'd be going against you would be the head-to-head on Hypo, but your chances are 1 in 4, and you can again test for Hypo. So you'd be 1 on 4 on making the Hypo, and you'd be 1 in 4 on getting the Mandarin. The odds are a little tough on hitting both in the same combo, but that would be one of the most incredible snakes I think out there. So, you know, I like showing people stuff like that, painting a picture of the broad future that you might be able to make with this. And yeah, you look at it here, it could look even more intense than that in about 6 years if things go right. Next up, one of my absolute favorite pieds out there would be this Suma Pied. You know, you often talk about how to make Suma Pieds. Well, here's one. It's a really good price, quite frankly. You might think $700 isn't a good price, but Suma Pieds command a hefty amount, and they deserve it. They're gorgeous, they're beautiful, they have all this nice bronzing on them, and there's a lot of chaos to it that I love. In fact, in some ways and in some forms, I've seen ones that trick you into maybe believing that they're paradox in some way, but they are not. You can kind of see that here, where it looks like you have two different colors of brown smashing into each other. Heck, you can see it throughout the snake where it starts to change shading, but it looks very bronzy, kind of going throughout it, and you get this wild dance between very darks that are almost flirting with black to this more bronzy and lighter brownish type color. You can see it right here where it's darker, very, very dark here, more of a penny type color right here, and throughout the rest of the animal. It's a very gorgeous animal. I love the Suma Pied. So if you wanted to work that, this male here is always guaranteed to pass on one copy of Mahogany and one copy of Pied. So the het Pied would go to everything. So you put it to a visual Pied, obviously, in my opinion, and heck, you could just have one copy of Mahogany in there and maybe something else. You know, try to add a little bit more to the story and make something super and cool and unique. And it wouldn't be terribly hard. I know the asking price might seem a little high, but I actually appreciate when people do this because there's no reserve. So are you willing? Because that's cheaper than most are. I can guarantee you that. All right, and to finish it off, we have a few from KDF Reptiles, who are wonderful and beautiful creators of puzzles. I have my puzzle girl from them, and they have released a few of them here onto Morphmarket, both males and females, that are absolutely gorgeous. If you want to get into puzzle, no greater time. And heck, not for nothing, the shipping's free. That's always cool. You already know what you're going to pay. You can kind of see what puzzle does, and they make great examples of them. It just wildly blows up that pattern. It often has been described as obviously little puzzle pieces that need to be refit back together. But heck, let's not fit them back together. It's beautiful the way it is. But what's so awesome is that it flirts with both chaos and clean, because it's a pretty clean animal. But at the same time, its pattern is chaotic. There are no alien heads left anymore. It's just been completely blown apart, and the pattern is just wild, wonky, and unpredictable. I have heard people say that Puzzle is the new Clown. I do not think there's very much at all that will dethrone Clown, but it is very nice and going to be something very amazing. And if anything, I'd honestly say Puzzle is the new Pied, because Pied is very variable, and puzzles can be too. Next up would be this boy here, this banana Mojave Pastel Puzzle. I'm not too familiar with what Fluff is, but it is a genetic. I'm sure I will be asking them next time I see them at the Tinley show, because it says it even here, Fluff. A het puzzle to a puzzles. But another really good male here if you wanted to work banana puzzles. We're hoping to create banana puzzles this year with a bunch of other awesomeness in there, but they're gorgeous. What they do with the patterns and everything, it's amazing. And now you're basically taking what we saw here and adding a different color palette to it. One more here would be this super pastel puzzle. And one thing I've noticed is that puzzle and pastel seem to go together quite well. They create this very cloudy looking animal. Often there's so much that affects the head on a puzzle as well. As you can see here, it kind of is doing the same thing. You can see it on the first pastel as well, where you get these little dots on the head, and it kind of almost looks Enchi like in a way. This one here fades out completely, and you can see this pattern, as we mentioned earlier, is wild, wonky, out of control. Another grill here would be a great one to add if you wanted to start creating some puzzles. I would definitely check out these three from KDF Reptiles, because I can speak personally to the quality of them. I've never had a snake get ready faster. I never expected her to go. When she did, I could never be happier. She's the best eater I've ever had. So, personal endorsement for me to definitely take a look at these three fine specimens from KDF Reptiles. And that'll do it for this week's auctions. Hope you enjoyed. If you got anything, as always, from this week's auction or from any of the other ones you've watched, please let us know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, you can actually check out some of our walkthroughs, or you can check out our video on some of the genetics these animals carry right here.